I want to share with you a little of my testimony related to connecting, related to belonging, related to what I've come to know as the world of the foreigner. When I was a child, when I was a kid, I can think back to memories of times related to school or family or even friends of not really feeling connected. I don't have a lifelong best friend. I have some kids I was friends with off and on through school. In high school I had some friends. I went into the Navy, but never really belonged. It wasn't that I was the loner or trying to be a loner. It wasn't that I was pushing away people. I didn't know how to connect with people, for one, but I think I was also looking for connections that I wasn't finding. I ended up getting married, having kids, and having my wife and my daughters in my life. You would think that all of a sudden connection was there, that I had everything I needed, but that wasn't satisfying maybe the deepest needs that I felt in my life. That wasn't reaching to the core of my being, if you will. My marriage, at about the 12th year, in the 12th year, my marriage started to have some problems, which I actually was very blind to. I knew I was unhappy. I knew I was having troubles, but I wasn't really aware of how the marriage as a whole was having problems. In the midst of this, I started learning about Jesus Christ. I started hearing about this man, and I started to investigate who this guy is, and I found him to be different than any other human being I'd ever read about or explored or investigated. And with that going on, and with the marriage problems that were leading further and further into problems, getting worse and worse, I guess, there was a point where basically the marriage was about to disintegrate. In that moment, having learned a little about Christ, for the first time in my life, I basically called out in prayer to God saying, in essence, help. Help. And in that moment, what was ideas and maybe theory and pictures of a person started to become real. God spoke in that moment and basically gave me a couple choices on the way I could handle the problems. I could either fight against it or I could allow him to change me. And I'm glad I said, Lord, change me. Over the course of the next, let's say, 2 years, although it's ongoing, over the course of the next 2 years, God started to work with me and change me and mold me and shape me. One way he started to work with me is in the area of love. Now, remember, I had been married. I had 2 daughters at this point, and the idea of love was, what do I get out of it? Maybe emotions, things like that. I wasn't feeling a lot of love because I didn't really know how to love, and I didn't know what it meant to be loved. I had good parents when I was a kid. I would say, looking back, they loved me. But whatever it was deep down inside that I was longing for, that I wanted as far as connections, they weren't able to give it in the way I was looking for it. And so over this course of time, this year, God taught me actually how to love and how to be loved. He taught me in the sense of good thing this part will be edited out. He taught me in the sense of not looking externally for love, but recognizing his love poured out on me. And in the midst of learning love, I also learned joy, and my life was greatly transformed in the midst of this. The year was 2001. So God was teaching me about love. Another thing that happened in the same time period was that in reading about Jesus Christ, in learning about him, I had been part of a small group that helped me grow, and then I eventually got plugged into a church. And I noticed that the church said I had an option to enter into discipleship if you were interested in discipleship. And so there was a box on the card that I checked that said discipleship. And my reasoning for this was I realized that the people who hung around Jesus were called disciples. And I said, I want to be one of them. I want to be one of these people that hang around this guy who's so unique, so amazing, so beyond this world in a sense, but so human in the same frame and so in the same way. And so I checked that box, and it entered me into a relationship with the senior pastor of the church I'd been attending, started attending that year. And so discipleship started to play. This was beginning of the year, beginning of 2001 was when the marriage really showed the sign of crumbling, and that's when I called out to God. As the year progressed, I was learning about love. I was learning about joy as God started changing me. Late summer, I entered into discipleship, and then came a very important date of 2001, 9/11. I remember very clearly driving to work and hearing on the news, living in California at the time, it was 7 o'clock in the morning when the second plane hit. I heard on the radio that this had happened, and all of a sudden inside I knew this wasn't an accident. I just knew it wasn't an accident. And as I listened to it, in that moment, God met me at that need, that fear, that hurt, that worry. And he said, I have you. You belong to me. So in that moment, tying together what he'd been doing in the work he'd been doing in me throughout the year, he tied together things that only in recent years have I come to recognize were the needs I had as a foreigner. A foreigner in the sense that I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know how to connect. One of the 5 spiritual worlds. Nobody at that time came to me and said specifically, Ed, this is your need. God worked with me. He didn't use that terminology, but that's what he was doing. He was working at my deepest need. I connected with Christ by first seeing him as somebody unique, somebody I wanted to know. It wasn't that I came and said, oh, I feel weighted down by sin, or I want to make a difference in the world, or that I don't know where I fit in. There was a deep need of belonging, of wanting somebody who really knew me. That's important in my life. Somebody who really knows me, wants to know me. And so the world of the foreigner in that beginning, that transformation time was how God was reaching to me and communicating to me and talking to me. And so over the course of the last 16 years, this is 2017 when I'm recording this, in the course of the last 10 years, or 16 years, I've learned how to love. I've learned how to belong. I've also learned how not to be feel like a bus has run over me when people leave my life. I've learned to be connected in a healthy way. On the marriage, back to the marriage side, God restored our marriage over the course of about 2.5, nearly 3 years. He brought healing to myself. He brought healing to my wife. Our family is doing wonderful. We've been married 27 years now. So God has done a great work in working with all of us. But that's my story as a foreigner. I hope that's helpful to you as you explore the 5 worlds.